Well, chapter 13 has such a powerful message for us today. It's amazing. Now, as far as like a time, so chapter 11 and 12 kind of continued on with each other. Chapter 13 is going back before chapter 11. And as far as like if you're trying to chronologically put these revelations and ideas and concepts together, we're moving back, okay? It is about destruction of the last days. Now, this is something lots and lots and lots of people try to theorize and talk about. I even have a whole nother video put out about how to understand Latter-day prophecy. This is part of those prophecies. This is important for us to understand, okay? This is a glimpse, a snapshot, an opportunity to see what's happening. So we're going to learn some great things today about Latter-day prophecy of the last days destructions in this chapter today. So let's get into this. Now, there's an important point that's made here in the beginning in verse 1, the burden of Babylon, which Isaiah the son of Amos did see. This is important for us to think about. Now, if you look at the footnotes for burden, burden as used in Isaiah is a message of doom lifted up against a people. So this is a revelation to Babylon. Now, we need to understand some things here, okay? If we think about this from a historical standpoint, at this time, Assyria, okay, the time that Isaiah is doing these revelations, Assyria is the world power. Assyria is dominating, it is growing, it is building itself up to be this amazing world dominating power. Babylon is a vassal state of Assyria. Basically, they got taken over a long time before Israel did, and Assyria tried to keep Babylon happy. Babylon's somewhat more ancient than Assyria in a way. Babylon's been around as a nation, small little nation for a long, long time. Has a lot of ancient history involved with it. But Babylon and Assyria tries to get Babylon to go along with it by marrying kings and princesses and things to try to unify the two groups together, to pull those heritages together of the kingdoms. And it doesn't really work out. And eventually, Babylon, we know, because of where we're at in history, Babylon eventually destroys Assyria. So, but we have to understand historically, Babylon is still just a small little part of the Assyrian Empire. Assyria is the big player here. So this is really forward-thinking stuff. So this is a revelation to Babylon. And you might think, why is Isaiah giving revelations to a non-Israelite nation? Well, an important point to understand is prophets aren't just prophets to God's people. Prophets are prophets to the world. And so we see this happening. Okay, Jeremiah give revelations as well. We'll see that also. So a prophet is a prophet to the world. We are all children of God. Prophets are for the children of God, not just for the church. So prophets can prophesy things that happen outside of just the church, basically. So this is about Babylon, okay? Verse 2, lift ye up a banner upon the high mountain, exalt the voice unto them, shake the hand that they may go in the gates of the nobles. So this is, he's talking about, of course, banners, lifting the banners up in here. This is like an ensign to the nations. Have them see and hear my message, is what verse 2 is talking about. Get up high up in the mountains, proclaim to the people, this is what's going on, basically. Now, here's something interesting. This is what Hugh Nibley has to say in his book, Old Testament and Related Studies, chapter 8. He says, in the 13th chapter of Isaiah, we see the burden of Babylon, the vast activity, the noise, the bustle, the self-importance, the consuming hunger for profits in this great world center that is also another Sodom, a sink of moral depravity. By a great miracle, King Hezekiah of Judah was snatched from death and given 15 more years of life. In an outburst of joy and gratitude, he voiced his thanks and his infinite relief at knowing that God was able to give whatever one asked of him, even life itself. What is the security of all the world's wealth in comparison to that? And then a significant thing happened. Ambassadors arrived from Babylon, and Hezekiah simply could not resist showing them through his treasury. displaying his wealth and power. This is Isaiah 39. So this is talking about, it's kind of thinking ahead of where this is all going to go. The man could not resist showing off, and by his vanity he only whet their greed. They liked what they saw and came back later to fetch it. He had played right into their hands. So that's this idea of Babylon. So remember, Babylon is small. Assyria's taken over. Babylon is small, but Babylon's going to grow and become a mighty nation, basically. So that's important to think about. So this is Isaiah saying it will be Babylon that brings the justice of God on Israel. So this is really foreign thinking. Okay, if you're an Israelite at this time, you're going, Babylon? Why are you saying Babylon is going to cause the judgments of God on us when it's Assyria we've got to worry about? And Isaiah's going, no, you guys are seeing it wrong. You're not seeing it the way God sees it. He knows better. And so this is a great lesson for us, is understanding the wisdom of God oftentimes goes contrary to the wisdom of the world. There's patterns and trends of how the world does things, and how God does things is different. It's not going to logically match up with the world. So that's important for two reasons. One is questioning what the prophets are telling us, because we don't logically see that happening, is not good, because God can make anything happen he wants to. And it does work out the way God says. The other thing, and he can see workings of things going on outside of our perspective that we don't even realize that are happening. And so he knows the greater scheme of things and can tell us what's going to happen. The other thing that's important for us to look at too is not just that God can see further than us. And so we shouldn't question what the prophets tell us. If it sounds weird, it's not because it's weird, it's because it sounds different than the world's logic, basically. The world's logic would think this step, then this step, then this step, then this step. And God's going, no, it's this step, then over here, and then it comes over here. So, and that's going to work out better than what the world was thinking. So that's important to understand, okay? The other thing to look at is we cannot come to Christ in a logical way. We can't just intellectualize ourselves to the gospel. It doesn't work. Intellectualizing yourselves is trying to understand God through the logical map of the world. And it doesn't work. This is where a lot of scholars, Bible scholars and others have contradictions and problems with the apostles, because they see it logically would go this way, but God is telling us this. And so they sometimes say, well, I'm going to say the logic of men. Just because a bunch of scientists can claim they can prove things in one way, doesn't mean it's right. Whereas God's like over here going, nope, this is actually the better way to go. And if you get stuck over here, you're going to have problems. So this is kind of idea of the faith crisis concept as well. Realize the logic of the world doesn't match the logic of God. And so this is a great chapter to explain that concept to us. Israel's worried about Assyria. They just fought Ephraim and Syria, but now Assyria is going to march down on them, and they're freaking out. And they're going, why are you talking about Babylon? What's going on? Because remember, Babylon doesn't come in and take out Israel, doesn't come in and march over and occupy Israel for a while. It's going to be another 100 and some odd years before that happens. And then Israel's not destroyed at that time. It's not till later when Nebuchadnezzar realizes that Zedekiah basically is going against him, that he utterly destroys Israel. That's 585 BC. So we're still around 750-ish, 730-ish time frame. So we're still like 100 years, a little more than 100 years from all that happening, basically. So let's keep going on with this. We talked about verse 2, the ensign put a banner to get people to say, hey, come listen. Verse 3, I have commanded my sanctified ones, or saints is another synonymous way to think about that in the Hebrew language, which are the people who are following, the humble followers of God. I have also called my mighty ones for mine anger, even them that rejoice in my highness. The noise of a multitude in the mountains, like as of a great people. A tumultuous noise of the kingdoms of nations gathered together. The Lord of hosts mustereth the host of the battle. So we think about these ideas is, remember, Lord of hosts means God of war. That is very important. So there's a battle going on. Now, metaphorically, there's a battle between Babylon and Zion always happening. This is that idea of the war in heaven continuing into this world. Babylon meaning the world, the worldly ways, Satan's way of doing things, Zion, God's way of doing things. So verse 4 is somewhat of a shape metaphorically of this grand good versus evil battle that's happening basically. And they're rallying together the forces. This is also, in fact, let's see, this is the Old Testament study manual. I had this. It says, the multitude is a great people who come together, mustered by the Lord of hosts, ready to do battle. These multitudes are the saints who will be gathered from every nation in the last days and enlisted in the army of the living God to wage war against wickedness. See Doctrine and Covenants 10 and 29 and 45 and 76 and 84, 103, as well as Matthew 24. So this is also thinking forward of the challenge of the the righteous will be gathered together, the wicked will be gathered together, it'll be a big fight basically. But this is also, again, literally talking about how it's Babylon that is going to destroy Jerusalem. Assyria is not. It's Babylon that's going to do this. So verse 5, they come from a far country, from the end of heaven, even the Lord, and the weapons of his indignation to destroy the whole land. So again, you need to think about that duality of, literally this is talking about a prophecy of Babylon marching in to wipe out Israel, but it's also a metaphor of the battle between good and evil spiritually, this metaphor that's happening. As well as in the last days, of course, this will happen. Verse 6, howl ye, for the day of the Lord is at hand. It shall come as a destruction from the Almighty. Therefore shall all hands be faint, and every man's heart shall melt. It's going to be a scary time. Verse 8, and they shall be afraid. Pangs and sorrows shall take hold of them. They shall be in pain as a woman that travaileth. They shall be amazed one at another. Their faces shall be as flames. So this is some interesting imagery that we're getting in here as well. The pains and the sorrows that will take hold of people is like a woman who's giving birth. So if you think of natural childbirth, the pain and the suffering that a woman goes through to do that, that's the kind of pain and suffering that everybody's going to be facing. So again, this is the future of Babylon destroying Judah, destroying Jerusalem and Israel, as well as the pains of this battle of light and dark. Their faces shall be as flames. That doesn't mean their faces will be on fire, but it could mean maybe their faces are like white, like flames, like bright, like flames, colors like flames, could be something like that as well. Verse 9, behold, the day of the Lord cometh, cruel both with wrath and fierce anger, to lay the land desolate. For he shall destroy the sinners thereof out of it. Now this is important for us to think about, this whole chapter, especially when you think of 2 Nephi, because 2 Nephi 23 recites this chapter as well. We are told that the destruction of Assyria and the destruction of Babylon is a type and shadow of the destruction of the wicked during the last days. So understanding historically the nation of Assyria and how they crumbled and how Babylon rose and then fell as well to Persia is important for us to understand. And so that's kind of this is talking more about the destruction of Israel, but we're going to see that is coming as well. Now verse 10, for the stars of heaven and the constellations thereof shall not give their light. The sun shall be darkened in his going forth. The moon shall not cause her light to shine. So what could cause this to happen? Possibly a lot of smoke or clouds blocking it out. Maybe there's a lot of fires going on as cities are being burned to the ground. What about volcanic activity? That would have this happen. If the moon's not causing her light to shine, that's the sun. We know now that the moon doesn't have light of itself. It's reflected light from the sun. If the moon is not showing us, we could talk about eclipse. happening. The moon shall turn red as blood. That's an eclipse, a solar eclipse, if I remember right. I think that's right. A solar eclipse is when the Earth's shadow gets in the way of the moon, whereas a lunar eclipse is when the moon gets in the way of the sun. No, solar eclipse would be the moon. That's right. I reversed those. Lunar eclipse. So, okay, so maybe I just confused myself on that. But anyways, you can correct me in the comments. Please do that. Okay, verse 11, I will punish the world for their evil and the wicked for their iniquity, and I will cause the arrogancy of the proud to cease, and will lay low the haughtiness of the terrible. So it's not good to be arrogant and haughty, because you're going to be destroyed, basically. Humble, submissive is what God's looking for, not arrogant and prideful and haughty. So verse 12, I will make a man more precious than fine gold, even a man than the golden wedge of Ophir. So here's something I want to think about with this. This is from the Old Testament Study Manual. He says in chapter 13, verses 11 and 12, Isaiah repeats a refrain used earlier, which is Isaiah chapter 4. We talk about this, that righteous men will become as difficult to find as precious gold and will be treasured as highly. The wicked will be cleansed from the earth, and the worthy righteous will remain to become the precious jewels in the royal diadem of the Lord. See D&C 60, Isaiah 62. Indeed, the treasure of the golden wedge of Ophir, which is the rich gold-producing province of India, is significant compared to the worth of one righteous man. Compare D&C 18:10. So that's what he's talking about is that a man will be more precious than gold. Now, I think there's two ways that we can interpret this. Okay, one is I think we can look at this and say that we will begin to value the life of a person more than the life of stuff. This gets into the Master Mahan principle that we've talked about a lot through the Old Testament. Master Mahan principle, if you go back into Genesis and look at this, and even in the book of Moses, that talks about this. The Master Mahan principle is understanding how to convert life into property. How can I take your life and turn it into something that I can commoditize and build and value to my life? I can't literally take your life to improve my life. I can't suck the life out of you to give me more life. But what I can do is use the values of your life to turn it into a tangible object that I can then sell and do to enrich my life with. So it's kind of an indirect value, but that's the Master Mahan principle. So what verse 12 is saying is basically that's going in the other direction. So we will value life more than stuff, which is good. That's the millennium. Going into that millennium, the fullness of the gospel, will realize, oh, we shouldn't be killing and hurting people. This is dumb. Let's not. So kind of along the same lines we talked about in chapter 11 about the lion and the lamb laying together. Those kinds of things can work. Now, also, though, the other thing we can think about is because the wicked are going to be destroyed by wars, wars are usually fought by men. Men are the ones that are usually recruited to go to battle. So this could mean the destruction is so great. If you remember in Isaiah 4, we talked about this, that the destruction of Israel will be so great that so many men will die because of war that there will be a lack of men. And back then, of course, women weren't allowed to own property. They were seen more as property, and so they had very limited rights. So to expand their rights, they needed to be married. And so in order to be married, you got to find a man to marry. So one man versus a lot of women. So you could look at that. Sometimes you could look at that too and say, well, if this is talking about the last days, men are more valuable, maybe polygamy comes back in the millennium. I don't know. I'm not going to say that that's what that says. Some people could interpret it that way, but I wouldn't say that's a strong interpretation, honestly. But it is important to realize that human life will become valuable, and there will probably be more women than men because of the destructions, the wars, and the challenges. Verse 13, therefore I will shake the heavens and the earth and remove out of her place in the wrath of the Lord of hosts and in the day of his fierce anger. Hopefully not literally. Now we understand in the laws of physics, to shake the heavens and the earth, to shake the earth is crazy. Now, the earth wobbles as it is, but we are held in place because of the gravitational effects of our sun and all the planets around us. So, in order for the earth's rotation to be disturbed, something else has to change in that gravitational equation. That could be bad. Any planet, if we get another big thing that comes into the solar system that starts orbiting, that's big enough mass that alters everything, could shake it up. Maybe a big, we have discovered, science has discovered, we call a planet a big rock that is orbiting a star, is a planet. But now they realize there's things that are just as big as planets. There are rocks floating through space that are just as big as planets, but aren't orbiting a star. So what do we call them? So now they're having to go, okay, how do we redefine what a planet is? Could something come in and catch an orbit and then suddenly disrupt that? That's possible. Theoretically, it's possible. Maybe that's what this is talking about. I would say this, we could probably keep this more in the category of conspiracy theory, because I don't think that's going to be an accurate thing. I think this is more metaphorical than literal. But there's a lot to go on here. In fact, the Old Testament study manual said, to have the heavens shaken and the earth removed was a Jewish figure of speech, suggesting a time of great calamity and disaster. Such would be the fall of Babylon. The whole political climate and circumstances of the world would be shaken. So again, they're saying, according to how ancient Hebrew is written, this is a concept, not a literalness, that the earth will be shaken out of its place, but that it is telling us that total economic chaos and destruction of everything, basically. So continuing on with the Old Testament study manual, they said the prophecy also has a literal fulfillment in the latter days. All things are to be restored. The heavens will flee as the earth is brought back to a condition it once enjoyed. The earth will then receive its paradisical glory. Its paradisical glory is not to be confused with the celestial state that is the eventual destiny of this sphere. It is rather the millennial condition wherein all life will enjoy continual peace. This is Joseph Fielding Smith's The Signs of the Times, is where we get that information from. So the earth will be going through a change to be more celestial, not to be fully celestialized out, but it will be changed. And that is going to change how everything works, basically. So that's probably what this is talking about. And again, more that it's going to be economic upheaval for all of us. Earthquakes, destructions, it will probably feel to us as if the whole world is, like the earth itself is being shaken because of massive earthquakes and problems. And we hear in the latter days, there's lots of prophecies of ancient prophecies of latter day earthquakes, big ones. So we have some potential big problems coming from earthquakes. Let's see, verse 14, and it shall be as the chased roe and as a sheep that no man taketh up. Now a roe is a deer, basically. So a chased roe is a hunted deer. A sheep that no man taketh up, or nobody gathers them in. They shall every man turn to his own people and flee everyone into his own land. So people are going to flee to what they consider safety because of the commotion and the challenges and problems. Verse 15, everyone that is found shall be thrust through. So if you haven't fled to safety, if you're like that sheep out in the field going, I don't know where everybody's going, what's going on, you're going to be thrust through. And everyone that is joined to them shall fall by the sword. So there's going to be a desolation of war, that if you don't flee to safety, like the places of Zion, the temples, then you're going to have to fight. You're going to have to deal with this. And that's what's going to happen. Verse 16, their children shall be dashed to pieces before their eyes. Their houses shall be spoiled and their wives ravished. Now, if you think about this too, we're still talking, while we're talking latter day destruction of the wicked, problems too, we're still prophesying here. Isaiah is prophesying Babylon destroying Jerusalem. This is 585 BC. Okay, this is when this happens. This is Lehi in the beginning of the Book of Mormon talks about this destruction. Nephi tries to convince his brothers of this. Why are they leaving? They're all going to be destroyed. You don't want to be back here. And they're like, yeah, but it's so cool back here. My friends are back here. My money's back here. And that's what Isaiah is talking about, is this is the destruction. It's going to be utter destruction, really bad. Verse 17, behold, I will stir up the Medes against them, which shall not regard silver, and as for gold, they shall not delight in it. That is really important. So now the Medes are the Persians. They were a neighboring nation next to Babylon. So they're out here. They're in today's world, we would call this more Eastern Iran. Okay, not Iraq, Eastern Iran. So they're far to the east end of the Middle East, if you will. That's where ancient Babylon and Persia, or the Medes, were. They were neighboring nations, not super big nations, but neighboring nations when Assyria came through and conquered them long before it conquered Israel. And then they eventually joined together and took out Assyria, basically. So these are the Persians, Cyrus the Great. They banded together to defeat Assyria, but are separate now. So they will stir up the Medes against them. They're like, look, we're not going after Assyria because we want to improve our wealth. We're going after Syria because we hate Assyria, basically. Old Testament Study Manual also said this: Isaiah declared that as the Medes, those of the higher mountainous country above Babylon would descend upon the worldly gem of the Euphrates and decimate it. So in a spiritual sense, a higher power not interested in wealth would come upon the Babylon of the latter days and destroy its proud, its wicked, and its confederates. So if you look up 2 Nephi 23:15, that goes along with this too, you can see that verse there. So this is really interesting because he's saying, of course, Babylon is the one you got to worry about, Israel. They're going to come in and destroy us. But then the Persians are going to come in and destroy Babylon. That's what happens, actually. That's what actually happens. We're going to see this as we go through the rest of the Old Testament. We'll learn more about this, but this is what's going on. So, verse 18, so this is talking about the Medes. Their bows shall dash the young men to pieces. They shall have no pity on the fruit of the womb. Their eye shall not spare children. So when the destruction happens, it's just utter destruction. Verse 19, and Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldees' excellency, shall be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. It shall never be inhabited, neither shall it be dwelt in from generation to generation, neither shall the Arabian pitch tent there, neither shall the shepherds make their fold there. So if you remember back, go look at our videos on Sodom and Gomorrah in the book of Genesis. It was wasted away and destroyed. And you can look at what scientists believe. They found Sodom and Gomorrah now. They believe they know where those cities were. The place is a total wasteland. Like, things don't grow there because the land itself has been sterilized and destroyed. So, but they found a place where they think could be the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. So that's what they're talking about here. Babylon, so this little nation in eastern Iran, present-day eastern Iran, will be destroyed and will not be heard of again. That's what happened. When the Persians came through, Babylon went away. Persia took over the area and grew. And that was it. Babylon turned into ancient history. That's what happened. And this is all these things that Isaiah is seeing basically in chapter 13. So there's a lot of prophecy for their day and age, still future to them in Isaiah's time, that he's talking about here. But metaphorically or symbolically, we're seeing these concepts of the last days. The destruction of Babylon will be like the destruction of the wicked in the last days. So as we learned, a group will come down out of the mountains. So you could say, like, the gospel will come down out of the mountains, not interested in money to spread their message, but interested in giving their message freely, and it will destroy the wickedness of the world. Missionary work. That's this fulfillment from a spiritual sense of this. That's part of this duality that a lot of these prophecies have basically in them. So that's what's happening today. Now let's see, Old Testament Study Manual had another thing to say about this too. It says Isaiah's description of Babylon in these verses was literally fulfilled. Remember that at the time Isaiah wrote, Babylon was not a world empire. Under Nebuchadnezzar, Babylonia overthrew Assyria and took over the reins of world power. And it wasn't so much Nebuchadnezzar. His dad, Nabopolassar, is the one that started that, but Nebuchadnezzar finished that whole battle and took that over. Let's see. Nebuchadnezzar undertook a building program which made Babylon one of the most remarkable cities of the ancient world. To predict the total devastation and desolation of such a city was remarkable. For some ancient cities, such as Jerusalem, Damascus, and Jericho, have continued through the centuries and still exist today. But after its conquest by Cyrus, Babylon steadily declined. Several hundred years passed before Babylon was abandoned, but by the first century after Christ, it lay deserted and in ruins, and so it has remained. The silent ruins stand as an eloquent witness that Isaiah spoke with divine accuracy. Now spiritual Babylon shall likewise become a waste and desolation when God comes upon the world in judgment and ushers in the millennial reign of Christ. See Revelations 18 for more. So this is, again, last days. It's going to happen fast. And if you look at how Babylon fell, it was nearly overnight. It was unexpected and unannounced. It just suddenly happened. And we're going to get into the book of Daniel. We'll talk more about that. So realize when we talk about the destruction of the wicked, we're not going to see it coming. It's just going to happen. When Christ comes and that destruction happens, it's going to take us all by surprise. So do not think you can predict, oh, Christ is going to come on this day, which means I have until this day at midnight to get ready. So I really believe that's one of the reasons why God hasn't told us when Christ is coming again, is because if we knew Christ was coming in the year 2030 on April 7th or whatever, it doesn't matter. If we knew that, we would procrastinate till January 1st, 2030. We'd be like, I can do whatever I want and I'll hurry and repent and then I'll be good right before he comes. So he says, look, I'm not telling you when he comes. You just need to always be ready. And that's important for two reasons. One is he could come at any time. Two, when you die, you lose the opportunity to make some changes to your life. And so you're kind of stuck with where you're at. And because you don't know when you're going to die, you need to be prepared to meet your maker at any point. Because you kind of can't change the answers. That's like turning in your test. You turn it in. Whatever you put down is what you put down. So always be ready for the coming of the Savior. That's more important than knowing when he's going to come. So when you see people who are out there going, I think I can predict when the Savior's going to come and all this stuff, don't listen to him. God told us he's not going to tell us. All these scriptures tell us it's going to happen unannounced. It's going to surprise us all. The thief in the night metaphor comes in here as well. It's just going to happen and we're not going to expect it. It's not going to follow worldly logic. It's just going to happen. So be prepared. It's more important to be prepared than it is to predict when he's coming again. So this is such an important key to latter-day prophecy as well. So I hope you pay attention to that. Tell your friends and family about that. Share this video with them to say, guys, here's a key to help us understand latter-day prophecy. The key is always be ready for God to come. Because either you're going to die and go to spirit world and then you can't change your answers. You can't make those changes anymore. Or he's going to come and it's going to happen and you're not going to be ready for it. It's not going to follow the worldly logic. Anybody that tells you they can follow a logical thing like numerology or other things like that, these worldly concepts, to say I've used mathematics or I've used science to prove when God's going to come again, I can guarantee you 100% accuracy, they will all be wrong. Because that's not what God wants. He's not trying to help us to predict. He's trying to help us build faith in him and to repent. That's what he wants us to do. That's the more important thing, not trying to predict it, basically. So just be careful when you deal with those latter-day prophecies. As soon as somebody says, I figured it out when he's going to come again, nope, you're not. You're out. You've just broken the rule. You have now proven to me you're not following God. Nope, because it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is, am I ready to meet God? That's the only question. I need to be always ready to meet God, because if I die, it's just as if he came, because it's no different. I can't change the answers now. When you die, you turn in your test, and what you get is what you get. Sorry, just how it is. So you need to work on that. Okay, this is where proxy baptism stuff help out. But if you had your chance and you didn't take it, you might not get a second chance. So Let's just start now working on how can we come to Christ? How can we improve ourselves? What part of the world can we get rid of next so that we can come closer to God? How do we pull ourselves out of the world? How can we prioritize the things of God more than the world, more in our life than we ever have before? That's what the prophet wants us to focus on. That's why we have these scriptures, is to help us understand that's what we need to be doing. So I hope you're enjoying these videos. Please like them and subscribe to our channel if you are. Share them with other people. Tell them about them so that we can help more people to open their minds and understand how to get into these scriptures, how to study, how to understand these scriptures so that they can then get into these deeper meanings as well. Thanks. We'll see you in the next chapter.